But I feel like some of us should be slaves again.
Think of an entire group of people?
Well, I'm sure it did. I'm not discounting that. I'm just it shows they were actually better in the 1940s. It was bad. It was evil. But what happened? Something changed. They committed less crimes.
Maybe they were afraid. I mean, 4,000 black men, women, and children were killed in violent lynch mobs.
That's your explanation. But
racial terror permeated American culture for hundreds of years.
Black America is worse than it has been
that affected
in the last 80 years.
The generational psyche of an entire group of people?
No, I'm sure it did. I'm not discounting that. It shows they were actually better.
Slavery wasn't that bad, but yet they ate us. Like, actually ate us. And used our skins to make leather belts and shoes. But it wasn't that bad, right?
I literally believe that there is an evil intent to re-enslave Black Americans, and the ability for us not to read, to me, is everybody should be hitting the alarm on that. Like, why aren't Black boys learning how to read and yet being encouraged to make music, to follow hip-hop, to do this, to do that, follow sports,
I feel like a couple years ago, if somebody were to have said they feel like there's an evil intent to re-enslave Black people, Candace Owens would have went off like, that's just in your mind. That's the narrative you're creating. You can go do whatever you want to do. It's you guys holding you back. No one's doing this. And I'm not attacking her, but I would like to know what changed. What was she exposed to? What did she see?
Back then, a lot of Black people participated in the slave trade themselves. So
yeah, that doesn't make slavery right. Are you trying to defend slavery?
It was a product of the time, dude.
Are you trying to defend slavery?
Did you not see Matt Walsh's new video on this topic?
I did, and I think that defending slavery is cringe as
defending slavery, but I think we're illogical if we didn't realize that a lot of Black people enjoyed being slaves back when slavery was a thing.
Well, how do you know that Black people enjoyed being slaves?
I mean, it's just in history. I've read about a lot of Black people not only participated in capturing slaves, but a lot of Black people enjoyed being slaves. Because of course, when you're really? Brought up doing something like being a slave your whole life, it's all you know. I'm sure a lot of slaves probably enjoyed it and were happy because that's the only lifestyle they were aware of.
That's crazy.
Can you not think like that? Like, is it really that dense?
I have never heard of somebody enjoying having to work countless hours on a plantation, being dehumanized and whipped and told that they're not human, and being beaten within an inch of their life, and being
saying that.
I don't think that people enjoy that.
You can't deny the fact that there were probably slave owners that, just like there were really bad ones, there were probably slave owners that probably treated their slaves really nice too, right? Like, you're not thinking logically. You're being so dense.
So I'm just going to say that in general, I think it's wrong to own humans.
Of course. We're not in that time period anymore.
But you're defending slavery.
I'm not defending it. I'm saying it was a product of the time.
You said that Black people enjoy being slaves.
I think there were probably a good majority of Black people who back then were born and raised as slaves, probably because that's the only thing they knew. It was the environment they grew up in. If they had a slave owner who treated them well, they probably enjoyed their lives, a few of them. I think it's illogical to believe that every person who was a slave back then hated their life. I truly think that's illogical. I do.
Are rightfully horrified right now by this video, but what we shouldn't be is shocked. This isn't new. This is what conservatives have been teaching their children for a long time. Just look at the schools where they have control over the curriculum, i.e. Christian schools. I attended Christian schools and I was taught this. I was taught that Hollywood and the media incorrectly dramatized slavery, that most slave masters were kind, good people, that most enslaved people were quite happy, and that ultimately slavery was a net good, because without it, those enslaved people would never have encountered Christianity. But not only that, if you were not raised in conservative Christian circles, you might not realize that they don't condemn slavery as a whole. Instead, they separate slavery into different categories. That way they can condemn the really bad forms, but still keep the good ones. If you want to see an example of this in real time, just ask a conservative Christian why the Bible supports slavery. They will immediately jump to, it's not the bad form of slavery, as though there's a good form.
Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, talking about bringing slavery back. But are they? Look, while we're not journalists, we're not held to ethics and honest reporting, we should still practice that. And thus far, there's no verification that this supposed conversation is true, at least according to Snopes. Now, it could turn out to be true, but it's not, so far as we know. And we should really practice being as ethical and honest as we can. We know MAGA isn't. They just literally make things up because their dear leader, who's all over the Epstein files, just makes up ridiculous shit multiple times a day. but we should hold ourselves to a higher standard. Verify, verify, verify.
The government has everybody in a new version of slavery. It's backwards slavery. The reason why it's backwards is because now we're not having to talk to or get stuff demanded by a slave master. Now we have to go to a business, which is the plantation, which, say if you're at a factory, what do they call that? A plantation. Now, what are you working for? Money. But now this money is the new slave owner. We're slaves to this cash. We don't need reparations for cash. We need reparations for our land and for our freedoms.
The more you learn about the U.S.'s history, the more excruciating it gets to live in it daily. The more I learn about the history of slavery and the Jim Crow era, just like the Civil Rights era, it makes, like, it puts everything into perspective, and all the pieces fall together. Like, oh, this is why living is so hard. And for everybody, honestly, like, people feel like they think that it doesn't affect them, but one of the reasons why we don't have universal health care, that we don't have free education, is because of racism. It's because they don't want Black people to have these social benefits. Once you actually do the digging and you see that it's not that long ago, and that these things have epigenetic, like, lasting factors, especially for Black people going through all that pain and suffering, everything starts to make sense, and this anger that we feel is justified. How are we going to fix this?
So, family, there is a very dangerous conversation currently resurfacing in certain corners of the internet, and it sounds almost unbelievable when you first hear it. People are actually saying openly or even indirectly that Black people should be enslaved again, family. Now, pause for a second and really process that. In 2026, after everything history has already shown us, after generations of pain, resistance, and even progress, this is still a thought that exists in some minds. And as an African watching this from the outside, family, it forces you to ask a deeper question, that what kind of system produces this level of thinking? Because this is not just about a statement, family. It's about what's underneath it. It's about power. It's about fear, misinformation, and even a refusal to confront history honestly. So slavery was not just free labor. It was not just a different time. It was a brutal system built on dehumanization. Families were torn apart. Identities were erased. People were treated as property. And the effects of that system didn't magically disappear. They evolved. They became embedded in economic systems, in social structures, and even in opportunities that were either given or denied. So when someone today says something like bring back slavery, what they're really revealing is not strength, but a deep ignorance of both history and reality. Because if you truly understood what slavery was, you wouldn't casually throw it around as the solution to anything. And here's where it gets even more interesting, family, and even uncomfortable. These narratives don't just come from one place. Sometimes they come from people who feel threatened by change. Sometimes from those who misunderstand poverty and even blame it on culture instead of systems. And sometimes they're amplified online for clicks, for engagement, and even for outrage, because controversy really sells, family. But let's talk about reality, family. Black Americans today are not dealing with the same chains, but they are navigating the long-term consequences of a system that was never fully repaired. Economic gaps, education disparities, mass incarceration. These are not random, family. They are patterns. And if you ignore the root, family, you will always misdiagnose the outcome. And as an African family, it's also important to acknowledge something else. The global Black experience is not identical. What a Black American goes through is shaped by a very specific history that includes slavery, segregation, and even systemic inequality. And so when we comment on it, we have to do so with the awareness, not assumptions. And now, does that mean that there are no internal issues within communities? Or of course not, because every community has areas that they need growth, accountability, and even self-reflection. But there is a difference between constructive criticism, family, and outright dehumanization, saying we need to do better is not the same as saying people deserve oppression. And that's the line that must never be crossed, family, because once you normalize language like they should be enslaved again, you are not just expressing an opinion, you are lowering the moral standard of society itself. You are making extreme ideas feel acceptable. And history has already shown us what happens when dangerous ideas are normalized. And so the real question is not, should this even be discussed? The real question is, why is this narrative resurfacing now? Who benefits from it, and what does it distract us from? Because while people are arguing over outrageous statements, real issues continue to exist. Economic inequality, access to opportunities, and even the need for honest conversations that lead to real solutions. And at the end of the day, family, this is not just about Black Americans. It's about the kind of world we are choosing to build, a world that learns from history, or one that repeats it in new forms. And if there is one thing history has proven, it's this: oppression is never the answer. It never creates stability. It never creates progress. It only creates circles of pain that eventually back to affect everyone. So instead of asking whether something like slavery should return, maybe the conversation we should be having is this: why are we still struggling to move beyond it?